You're listening to the History Things Podcast, a conversational approach to discussing social, industrial, maritime, music, and military history. Join us and our special guests as we dive down the rabbit hole of your favorite stories from the past. Follow the guys on social media by searching at the History Things Podcast. Be sure to leave a review and a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast app. Matt and Pat are coming right up. Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoy the show.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the History Things Podcast. Moving along here, wheeling and dealing, Season 6. Very excited to be broadcasting from the War Department studio. By my side, we've introduced him previously as a lot of things. Author, historian, Kung Fu Panda, or maybe master, I don't remember. But today he's coming to you from the bottom of the ocean. He's actually a deep-sea explorer today.
Wow.
Jacques Cousteau himself, Mr. Matty B. Matt Borders, how are you?
Doing well, sir. Where did that one come from?
I don't know, man. Like, sometimes they come out naturally and they're good, and sometimes, it's just scrape the bottom of the barrel there. But, I want to see how many jobs we can give you by the time Season 6 is over. How things going? We're moving right along here. Season 6 has been kind of a whirlwind.
Oh, yeah. No, we're putting them on the board. That's what's important, and I'm very pleased to have our speaker in the studio with us today.
That's right. No time to catch your breath, because once again, it's time for that annual visit from our very good friend, Kyle Dalton. Kyle Dalton, welcome back to the History Things Podcast. How are you, big guy?
Doing good. Buenos dias, hermanos.
Dude, I'm excited. You're probably this has got to be a thing now. Just the yearly story time with Kyle Dalton. We've done this 3 seasons in a row now. They've been bangers all the time. I'm very excited. So we've caught up with you in the past. We've talked about British sailors chugging along in the French and Indian War out in the frontier of Pennsylvania with Braddock. We've talked about how a family was divided quite literally by the American Civil War, a road literally dividing the family's homesteads with the Union Mills. What are we talking about today?
Well, I figured we've, done, I'm an early American specialist, of course, but we've done French and Indian War, 1750s. We've done Civil War, 1760s. I wanted to chronologically break it up. We're going to go right in the middle, 1790s. We're also going to change it geographically a lot. We're going 3,000 miles away from Maryland and the Chesapeake. We're going to go to the Pacific coast of California.
Matt, did you check with our accountant? Do we have enough miles to do this, like air miles?
I could pack up and go if you guys.
Yeah, I feel like you're ready to now. So we got to get on the
Now,
flight
you
right
hail
now.
from that part of the world, correct?
I do, yeah. Actually, so today we're going to be talking about a poisoning in early California. Specifically, one of my ancestors, my 6th great-grandfather, Gerardo Gonzalez.
Are we taking our second step into true crime? Because we did the
little bit, yeah.
We did Lizzie Borden, and that was as much history as it is true crime.
One of the reasons I was thinking this would be good is I listened to your episode with Dana Schoaf about Murder on the Potomac.
Oh, we've actually done.
You've done a couple true crimes.
We've done a couple
Yes,
true
we have.
crimers.
Yeah.
We're branded now. We know.
So, we're going to talk about Gerardo Gonzalez and his poisoning death. Or at least we're going to examine, was it really poisoning? Were the perpetrators who they thought they were? We're going to get into that. But I'm also trying to use this as a way of looking at early California history as a whole. I assume your audience is probably not super familiar with Spanish California.
I mean, I don't know. Are you? Hello?
Leave a
Is
comment.
anybody there?
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah.
Let us know.
Tell me the things I got wrong. The comments help to boost engagement.
That's right. Engage, but not like Maverick.
Right.
All right, so we're going to California. I've actually, furthest west I've ever personally been in my life is Paladero Canyon in Amarillo, Texas. So I've never got to the Rockies, never been to the West Coast. So literally, you're going to have to take me there, brother. You're going to have to put on that magical storytelling cape we know you have.
Yeah, we can do that. So we're going to start a little bit later, actually, a lot later. We're going to 1878. because at that point, there's a historian in California, an Anglo historian, who's trying to document the early history of what becomes the state of California. H. Bancroft, Hubert Howe Bancroft.
All right.
He's super into it. He is actually one of the reasons we have so much good documentation of oral histories of early California. He tries to catch everybody he can who was alive during the Spanish and Mexican period and capture their stories. Those stories wind up in the Bancroft Library, and thankfully, a lot of them are now freely available, digitized online.
Awesome.
And that's how I was able to find this one. This is my fifth great-grandfather, Rafael Gonzalez. He's the first alcalde of Santa Barbara, the first mayor of Santa Barbara. He is a soldier in early California, as are most men in early California. And in his interview in 1878, he has this to say. I don't know if either of you speak Spanish.
I speak enough to be able to communicate, but by no means fluently.
Then that's more than me.
I took Spanish in high school and it did not go well.
All right,
I learned what I know through working trade jobs.
Okay, well, that's more experience than I got.
Okay, all right.
Even though I am of Latino descent, I wouldn't call myself a Mexican. I wasn't raised in Mexican culture. I wasn't raised to speak Spanish. The two things that really stuck through from those generations were Catholicism and the food.
Okay.
Oh,
okay.
100%.
That's really all that survived.
You do have a reputation for knowing where the good Mexican food is. That's for sure. Right.
So I'm going to hand you this, Pat.
right.
If you could read that. That is a block quote from this 1878 interview of Rafael Gonzalez.
This whole thing. Nice. All right.
Yeah, because this is going to be what we're building from.
All right. I love this. This is also like a little role playing. I'm excited. Ready? Quote, I did not know my father because a few days before I was born, he was poisoned by the Indios, gentiles of the Peredon. According to what my mother and others told me, he became very sick and he died very soon after. The Indians there were Gentile, very tame and very obliging. My father was one of the first to plant there. He had little Indians called payareros. That was bad. I'm sorry.
It means bird watcher today.
I'm sorry, folks.
Probably back then it means somebody who's keeping the birds off the crops because he's mentioning him planting.
All right. To frighten the crows. Right, there you go. One day he went to mass or to attend to business, and when he came back, he saw the crows and grackles had eaten a huge quantity of grain, and he found that the, again, word I can't pronounce, payareros, hadn't been attending to their obligation. He gave each one a beating. He beat the birds? Or he beat the
kids?
Oh,
beat the kids.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
not a great guy.
Yeah, no, that's not strong. This seemed to discomfort the Indians, their relatives. Those Indians worked a lot in fishing in the sea, and one day they had their fish made with poisonous herbs, and they gave it to my father to eat fish, and he, without knowing that it was poison, accepted the gift and ate it. Very quickly, he presented with the symptoms of poisoning, becoming stiff, and died that same night. I didn't know if they punished the authors of his death. I should have had the dun 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 like right there.
You can do that in post.
I can. I can.
So so there's a few things there. So he says, I didn't know my father. He dies before I'm born. It's like right before he's born. It's like 2 weeks before he's born.
Oh, wow.
That's a lot of information
Gerardo
for
died.
not knowing.
It's a lot of information, right?
Right.
And it gives us a lot to work with. So Bancroft doesn't include the full quotation. He just says the fact that Gerardo was poisoned rests on the testimony of his son, which kind of suggests that he's a little unsure about that. And subsequent historians, when they do reference this, are often like, apparently, they'll put a word in like that to put a little like, we're not totally sure.
Right.
So not to bury the lead, I've done the research. I know he's been poisoned. We'll talk about that.
Okay.
But it's there's a lot more to unpack too when you look at the full context. So we're going to talk about California as a whole, and then we're going to narrow in on this story. And by the end, we'll hopefully have a more complete picture of what's going on here.
Cool.
I'm in. Do I need to wear anything like Sherlock Holmes? Do I need like the hat, the cape, or
If you could find a combination between his hunting cap and a sombrero, that would fit really well.
somewhere in this studio is a gigantic magnifying glass? Like, I kid you not. Like we could sleuth, detect things. All right.
So we're going to start with who is in California, because this is very early in California colonization. The colonization of Alta California, today's state of California, is very late. Here in America, in the United States side of things, British North America, you've got people showing up in the 16th century.
Right.
But the first permanent settlement in Alta California is 1769.
Oh, wow.
It's very late.
We're almost into our own independence.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, if you are a descendant of the soldados who settle Alta California, you are eligible for the Sons of the American Revolution.
Wow.
That's
right
how
on.
late we're talking colonization of Alta California.
Wow.
So, and also all the way until really the gold rush, the white population, or much more mixed population, as we'll see, the non-indigenous Californian population is a very small minority of the state.
Right.
It is overwhelmingly indigenous. We're talking like Plymouth Plantation days of like indigenous to Anglos.
Okay.
That's how big of a difference there is for quite a while, for generations after California's settlement. So there's a reason that this is such a disparity. I do want to start by saying I'm not an anthropologist.
All right.
I had a minor in anthropology, but that was mostly focused on archaeology. So like I could tell you about superstratification, but I'm
There you
not
go.
a cultural guy.
All right.
So I don't want to get too specific. And the other reason I don't want to get too specific is California is a very diverse place, to the point that when people are writing general histories of early California, it's kind of not worth it to do generalizations because there's so many people there and they are so different from each other. According to Kevin Starr in his book, California, A History, there were 135 individual languages in the state of California
Wow.
before colonization. That is
Wow.
Staggering. Yeah. Jeez.
He argues that a third of all indigenous Americans in North America by the time of colonization of Alta California are in California. That's a statistic I think you can argue with.
But that's a massive number.
The fact that you can make that argument and not immediately be called a conspiracy theorist tells you how many people there are in this place.
There's a lot of people.
It's a lot of people. And one of the reasons that the state can support that many, what becomes the state, is because it's very geographically diverse.
Oh, yeah.
You look at those early films in Hollywood. One of the reasons Hollywood takes off is because there's so many geographic regions of California.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, sure. For filming and whatnot.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in San Diego County. I grew up in the mountains, 3,000 feet above sea level, all pine trees. Cleveland National Forest was up there.
That's
little
not
gold
what I
mining
think of when I
town.
think of California, though. That's
Right.
crazy.
But that's a huge part of California.
Sure.
The Sierras run all the way down.
Right.
You go down to the coast, you hit San Diego, you've got the scrub brush environment down there. You go to the other direction, you've got a desert, like a classic desert with cacti and ocotillo and the whole bit.
This is where the rock stars go, by the way, where all the stories of like Jim Morrison in the desert, they're going out that way.
So you can, within an hour and a half of driving, go from scrub brush to peaks of the Sierras down to a traditional desert. It's very quick changes. It's a very geographically diverse region. That means that you can support a whole bunch of different kinds of sustenance. Now, they are kind of pushing it by the time the Spanish arrive. There's anthropologists who've argued that they're going a little too far in using up the land that they have, and the population has grown a little too big for the space. But that's what sets up the catastrophe of Spanish arrival. When you start introducing hogs, when you start introducing cows, when you start having competition, and when you start changing the landscape, there's catastrophic collapse.
Right.
But we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. This is a very geographically diverse region. It's a region that is abundant with resources, even if it's being pushed. A quarter of all plants found north of Mexico are present in California.
Wow.
You can
What?
grow almost anything there.
Can you grow potatoes there? That's all I need to know.
Yes. And they do.
All right. Excellent.
I remember I went to a museum in Santa Clara up by the Bay Area, and they were talking about the canning industry there in the early 20th century. And they said that a quarter of all canned food made in the world by World War II was just from the Santa Clara Valley.
What?
That's
Wow.
one valley in California,
And
a
the
massive
rest
state.
came from the Shriver family that we do every day. See, I remember things.
So this is a lush region. It is a region that is dependent on hunting and gathering. Largely. There's a lot of, now again, it's going to depend a lot on which group you're talking about, what exactly they're harvesting. But the Spanish come in and change things. But there's a reason that they're moving up there and a reason they're coming so late. So we're going to talk a bit about why the Spanish come into this environment so late compared to the rest of
I'm
North
glad, because I
America.
was going to ask otherwise, because it does seem really late to the game.
I'm wondering if this is attached to them getting sort of like pushed out of the southeast.
Not exactly, because
Okay.
they kind of have resettled New Mexico and Arizona by that point.
Okay.
But it is very far from their cultural center, Mexico City. Mexico City is the closest cultural center to Alta California of European context, anyway. So they're pretty distant. So that's number one. There's another reason for this is the default of colonization is colonization by sea. And that makes sense. You got to carry a lot of stuff to support a colony in the early days.
Yeah.
They're not going to do hunter-gatherer style stuff. They're not going to learn from the local people. So they have to import everything they need. The problem with the Pacific for that, specifically the west coast of what becomes the United States and the west coast of Mexico, is that the sea moves differently. In the northern hemisphere, when you flush your toilet, it goes clockwise. When you flush your toilet in the southern hemisphere, it goes counterclockwise.
Is that true?
Yes.
I've always thought that was just one of those things you learned as a kid, and you were just like, sure, why not? I'm
And
not
this-
going to Australia anytime soon.
This is also how oceans work. They move clockwise in the northern hemisphere. You think about the Atlantic context, the British Atlantic world. Here, I'm doing my maritime thing again.
But I'm cool with it. I'm always, Kyle, I am always here for it.
The real wealth of colonization in the British Atlantic world is the Caribbean.
Right.
You're coming down from Europe, you're skirting Africa, you're going near the equator to carry the currents across, you hit the Caribbean, then you come up along the American colonies. That makes the colonization of British North America a lot easier because you've got all these places to stop along the way. You're having the currents carry you.
Right.
And it's a pretty direct route from British North America back to Europe because you're going the northern route. The currents are carrying you that. But if you're trying to get from Mexico to Alta California, it's doing the opposite. It's going clockwise,
taking
so
you
it's going
away.
down. It's fighting you. It's a lot harder to get up to what is today California. And there's going to be consequences for that, for the Spanish as the story goes along.
All right. I just learned something, and I'm fascinated. I'll never look at the ocean the same way again. I'm definitely pro Atlantic Ocean now.
I love the Pacific. I'm going
I
to be
mean, that would
I'm a
make-
Pacific boy.
That would make sense. That's where you're from. I'm from over here. You're from over there.
So another reason is
East
that
Coast, West Coast historians.
That's what I'm saying. Do you think it's you thought it was a rap
West
rivalry? It's
Side.
actually a history rivalry.
So another reason is ecumenical, because Spanish colonization is very different from British colonization. British colonization, like Spanish colonization, is trying to make wherever they go British, or trying to make it Spanish.
Right.
But they have different approaches to that. The British have a racial context for that. If it's going to be Britain, that means they need to be British and be born British.
Right.
If you're going to make it Spanish, though, there's more of a religious angle to that. It means you're going to be Catholic, number one, and number two, culturally Spanish.
Which was definitely not happening in England. You're definitely not going to be forced to be Catholic.
Certainly not by the 1760s.
I was going
I'll
to
tell
say
you
that
that
they
much.
tried
Not
it
at all.
once and it didn't work out too
Not at
well.
all.
So the Spanish, one of the reasons that there is such a minority of colonists of Spanish colonists in Alta California is that they're more interested in converting the local populations and making them Spanish. They're not shoving them out of the way to put their own people in. They're trying to turn that population into an asset.
I have a question, and it might be like you might be getting to this in the story, and if I am, we can not answer this now. Is this why there are 1 million Spanish missions all around California?
I was just thinking that, not necessarily for California, but for
just
the
like-
American Southwest.
like just
yes.
everywhere. Yeah, like is this why? Because this is how they're coming
Yes.
in and just like doing basically religious conversions.
100%. Yeah. They are
Okay.
much more interested in converting the local population than building their own ethnically Spanish base. And even the people they're sending up there are not entirely ethnically Spanish. We'll talk about that a little bit. But yeah, the missions are the spear point.
Because every single Western you watch, at some point they end up in the old Spanish mission. And not even in Westerns. I'm pretty sure in The Patriot they end up at an old
They
Spanish
do.
They
Yeah.
do, actually, yes.
They do.
There's a lot of
Actually
weird
do.
stuff going on with the Patriot.
Yeah.
We can do an episode on
Yeah.
that sometime of just like, I don't know what's happening here.
The hatcheted guy lives. Wow, what?
It's interesting that you mentioned that, though, Kyle, because the the Jesuits are often joked upon as the stormtroopers of the Catholic Church. Well, that's exactly what they're doing.
Well, here's where it gets interesting, because the Jesuits do have a claim to Alta California. They're the ones who are settling Baja California in the lead up to it. Probably should step back for listeners who don't know. Las Californias is Alta California, Upper California, today's state of California, and Baja California, Lower California, today's Baja California.
Is that where they discovered the Mountain Dew strain?
I knew you were going to say something about that.
It's where fish tacos come from.
Why not?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, they get imported to San Diego by Rubio of Rubio's Baja Grill in the 70s, and he sort of makes it a big national thing, an international
He's
thing.
the first person to literally just think to make a fish taco?
Well, he brings it up. The Baja people were making it beforehand, the fried fish taco,
Right.
and he brings it up.
It's not like he just stood there and was like, oh my God, I have these ingredients. And the world was never the same.
Yeah, I mean, he's the one who popularizes it, but it comes from Baja.
Okay, cool. Not the Mountain Dew. But
This is probably not going to be the only diversion we have into taco.
I'm all right with this because you know what? We're recording this on a Tuesday, and we all know what's for dinner tonight in this house.
That's true.
Taco night. So
I got to share my salsa recipe with you sometime.
I'm here for it. Let's go. So anyway, all right. So Baja
Jesuits.
California. You have Jesuits, stormtroopers.
Jesuits
but
are
not
there.
Star Wars kind.
They're settling Baja California. They're bringing in soldados from the state of Nayarit, which is just south of the tip of Baja. If you're looking at the Pacific coast of Mexico, just south of the tip of Baja, that's Nayarit.
Okay.
And they're sending soldiers up from there to help them occupy and colonize Baja California. But in the 1760s, in the wake of the French and Indian War, the Jesuits are disbanded within the Spanish Empire. They're kicked out. If you ever seen the movie The Mission,
Really?
that's what that's about.
Okay.
The Jesuits are being kicked out. It's Robert De Niro, I think.
I think you're right.
Yeah, it's a pretty wild movie. It's worth checking out. He was the villain in the bad Dungeons and Dragons movie.
There's been a few bad Dungeons and Dragons movies.
What did you watch the Dungeons and Dragons movie, Matt?
I've watched most of them, yes.
Like
the most recent one was amazing.
Most recent one was really good.
Did you watch it willingly?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I'm talking about Blood Will Rain from the Sky.
All right, who is that guy?
I wish I his name.
He's got no business going that hard.
Right.
I know exactly who you're talking about.
What movies? In any other movie?
He's in a million other movies.
Is it Michael Caine?
No.
No.
All right, we'll just...
No, it's...
the way Matt said he doesn't have any business going that hard, that's usually what I think of when I think of Michael Caine.
He's one of those guys, though, where when you know who it is,
right.
You're like, oh, yeah, that guy. He's good at everything, no matter how bad it is.
Well, so Michael Caine in the Muppet Christmas movie, he goes way too hard, and that's usually where my brain goes. So when he was like, Michael Caine is in Dungeons & Dragons?
See, Michael Caine is playing Muppet Treasure Island as a Muppet. And Tim Curry in Muppet Treasure Island is playing it as a Muppet, whereas Michael Caine is playing as a human.
Yes.
Right.
I'm Michael Caine. I'm going to play this serious as a heart attack on a Tuesday.
Jeremy Irons.
Yes. Scar himself from The Lion King is in Dungeons and Dragons.
In the bad one with
exactly.
Wayans' brother.
Yes,
yeah.
the Blood Will Rain, yeah.
Okay, that's awesome.
That was a huge diversion.
That's okay. That's okay. Matt's going to want to edit it, but probably not going to.
Post-production.
It just happens. We make decisions. It is what it is.
So, right. Jesuits.
So Jesuits, Jeremy Irons.
Right, yeah. Jeremy Irons is a Jesuit in the mission.
Okay.
We're going back to the Jesuits, getting kicked out. So they're removed from Spanish colonization.
All right.
And
what was the reason for that?
I think I have that written down.
They were very pushy.
I don't have that written down here.
That's all right.
That's a pretty big one, though.
Checkmate.
Yeah.
You might not be allowed back next year now.
All right, I'll pack it up. So, anyway, the point is, though, for our story, for Alta California, they're kicked out. That gives civil authority a little more control over the Californias.
That's probably why they got kicked out.
And that, honestly, it's a big part of it. I know that part is there is a political angle to this, more political than anything else. They bring in the Franciscans. So the Franciscans are the ones who settle Alta California.
All right.
Junipero Serra organizes something called the Sacred Expedition. That's what we call it today. And that's to found the first mission in Alta California. He's under Gaspar de Portola. He's the governor of Las Californias. They bring a bunch of soldados and they start an overland route. And as they're doing their overland route, they also have ships coming up from San Blas, which is in Nayarit, to try and supply them when they get there.
All right.
This is the first mission, 1769, San Diego, Mission San Diego de Alcalá. And it is initially a disaster. They are just minutes away from disappearing, from this being a footnote in history rather than the founding narrative of California.
The Roanoke of the West Coast.
It was very close to being that.
Really? Wow.
So they get there, and the ship hasn't arrived. Again, the currents are working against them. The ships aren't getting there, and the people are getting sick as they arrive. And finally, when the ships do arrive, it's taken so long, they've run out of supplies, and scurvy is just wiping people out. The ships are more of a liability than a help.
Right.
There is a point in San Diego, if you're walking down the Embarcadero, the waterfront downtown, and you're going down to the convention center, there's this tiny little plaque on a street corner that you could very easily miss that says, this is the point of the dead. It's where they buried just a mass grave of all the sailors who died.
Wow.
To the point that like some of these ships can't be manned anymore. So many people have died.
How many vessels?
3.
Okay. I thought you'd said 3, but
That
I
was
didn't remember.
I like that.
And they're running out of supplies. The local people, the Kumeyaay, are not super happy with them being there.
Right.
Understandably so. They just showed up and are like, our religion is the thing now. Here's a bunch of soldiers. All of you are subjects of the king. And there is an initial uprising that attacks them and very nearly wipes them out. The Spanish do eventually bring out the literal guns, the muskets, fire a volley into the Kumeyaay, and they have had no experience with this.
Right.
They've never seen black powder before.
Not at all.
This is another thing that separates California from the rest of the Western experience is the guns don't permeate in the same way that it does for the rest of the West. So, the Spanish in Texas, in New Mexico, in Arizona, they're always barely holding on against the Apache, the Comanche, because they have horses and guns.
Right.
That never happens in California. The guns just don't penetrate.
How does that just happen by the way that global progress has just gone at that point? Like,
part of it is the Spanish aren't able to hold on to the Southwest that well. They don't have that many people up there. There's also a deliberate effort after they arrive to keep guns out.
So Europe just as a whole, Europe and Asia, because you got to include the Russian Empire because they have holdings in North America at this time and stuff too. Like, Europe has just not been to the west coast of what will become the United States. Like, how do they? That's what I'm asking is like, how do they just not have that?
Again, it's hard to get to.
Sure.
Again, you think about, well, what route are the Europeans taking? They're generally coming around the bottom of South America and coming up.
Right.
Once you get to the equator, it's very hard to keep going north.
Yeah.
So it's got to be progress over land.
And the Pacific is a much bigger ocean.
It's a huge ocean.
Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons that the Sandwich Islands really takes off in the 19th century is that if you want to go up the coast of California by sail power, you have to go very far west and then come around. So you can sail basically to Hawaii to come back over to go just from San Diego to San Francisco.
That makes sense.
That's so crazy.
So they're having a hard time settling this place. The Russians, though, are one of the reasons that they're settling Alta California. They're worried about the Russians.
Coming down from the holdings
because they've got Alaska. They are starting to move their way south. In the early 19th century, Fort Ross is founded by the Russian-American Company. That's only 100 miles north along the coast from San Francisco.
Really?
So, and that fort is still there, actually. There's an old Orthodox church you can go visit.
Oh.
So the Russians are working their way down. And the fear of the Russians was so great that, according to Claudio Saint in his book West of the Revolution, Bernardo de Galvez, a Spanish official, was hallucinating that Slavs were in Baja California when he was sick. They were just that afraid of it. The governor of Las Californias was like, the Russians are here, they're coming for us.
Jeez.
So they are genuinely concerned about the Russians. Now, part of this is also geographical ignorance.
Sure.
Even 100 miles north of San Francisco, they don't get there till like 1806. And they're not getting any further south than that, really. So, and the idea of Russian colonization all the way down to the point that it becomes a threat to Mexico City is a little preposterous.
You know what, though? But panic buttons get hit and people just react. Doesn't have to be rational anymore.
Right.
Things like that.
The Russians are having their own problems in Alaska and along what is now the Canadian coastline because the Tlingit are kicking their ass.
Yeah, the Aleuts are not fans of the Russians, and it gets pretty nasty up there.
Yeah, I don't blame them. That's what happens when you go into other people's homes and just try to live there.
Yeah.
So they settled San Diego. That's the first one, 1769. And they start settling other missions up along the coast.
Okay.
There's some other installations that eventually get placed there too. Presidios, that's your barracks, your fort.
Yeah.
There's only
I'm
4 of
familiar with
those in the Spanish period. And pueblos, those are civilian towns, and those are very few. I think by the end of the Revolution, there's only Los Angeles and San Francisco. So the missions are the big thing. The missions are the ones that are driving it. But the presidios are the ones that support the missions. You need the soldiers to protect the missions, and perhaps more importantly to the Spanish mind, to keep the indigenous people in line.
Yeah.
Now, presidios actual forts, because we still have a few that have deep ties to the United States Army and things like that, especially in California.
Yep.
Are they proper forts then?
They're closer to barracks.
Okay.
They're not like, if you're thinking 1770s, 1780s, you're thinking a fort, you're thinking like a star fort.
Right.
Whether it be stone like Fort Frederick or wood, it's more like a barracks. Some of them have walls. All of them have walls, I think. But they're not a proper military fort in the way you're thinking in the British North American context.
Okay.
But this is where Gerardo enters the story. He is from San Blas, or at least from Nayarit. He's one of those soldiers that may have been recruited to occupy Baja California and then works his way up to Alta. And he is not part of that first expedition. So San Diego's already happened. They've established the mission there. They've established the Presidio there. And he comes up sometime in the late 1770s or mid 1770s, somewhere in there. We don't have exact records for that. He is born Jose Rafael Gonzalez y Cruz.
Wow.
That's a great name.
Yeah. There's a lot of great names in this story. So as later records from the Mission Santa Barbara attest, he was commonly known as Gerardo. Almost every soldier in Alta California has Jose as their first name.
Really?
Yes, almost all of them. To the point that, like, on some of these census records, on some of these reports of soldiers that are garrisoned, they'll just leave Jose off. And it'll just be their middle name or one of the middle names and the last name. So even though Jose is his first name, he's known as Gerardo.
All right.
That's his second middle name, Jose Rafael Gerardo Gonzalez.
I lost track of how many names you said there, and I'm probably going to do it again.
And to be fair, the E Cruz at the end, that's usually just in your baptismal record. That says who your mother was.
Okay.
His mother was a Cruz. He's a Gonzalez.
Okay.
His father was Gonzalez.
Okay.
What is the Spanish naming tradition for so many names? I know there's confirmation name and baptismal name and things of that nature. Is it all tied into that?
It can be. Now, when I'm really more familiar with the frontier context of Alta California.
Gotcha.
And
you did say you were not an anthropologist.
Yeah,
I apologize.
No, we're talking about anthropological stuff, though, so it's important for me to know.
Yeah.
So in the Alta California context, it's usually you get a Jose. Just everybody gets that.
Yeah.
You.
Somewhere Oprah's just handed them out.
And then sometimes you'll be named after your father, and then you'll get a third name before your last name.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So that's a way of, so like he is Jose Rafael Gerardo Gonzalez. His son is Jose Rafael Marcelo Gonzalez.
They just keep adding names. The names just get longer.
Well, this one he dropped the Gerardo.
Oh,
from it,
sorry,
and it was Marcelo instead. But since his dad is known as Gerardo, he's known as Rafael.
Okay.
So that's it's.
I am lost.
The important thing is this guy's known as Gerardo. That's
my-
the direct translation from the mission record. He is commonly known as Gerardo.
My name is very simple. My people's name is very simple. It's just how you pronounce them. That's not simple.
That's true.
It reminds me of, I think I mentioned this last episode, the Wolf Hall thing of half the world is named Thomas.
Yes. Yes.
It gets very confusing. You can
does.
see why. Well, if everybody's known as Jose, well, we got to throw something else in there. Because
true.
that's going to be way too confusing.
That's true. It's true.
So here's where we start to complicate this story a little bit. Because so far we've been talking about Spanish versus indigenous.
Yep.
But it's more complicated than that because Gerardo is himself indigenous to Nayarit.
Oh.
He is not a Spaniard. He's not white. And this is where, again, you've got that Spanish model of colonization. You turn the indigenous people into Spaniards,
Right.
and you use them as the spear point of colonization. So in the Spanish system, there's something called the casta system. Are you familiar with the casta system at all?
I'm familiar with a caste system. Is it the same idea?
Kinda, yeah.
Okay.
That's where I was going.
Yeah, it's a racial caste system.
Okay.
Okay.
Definitely familiar with that concept.
Yeah, and early on in Spanish colonization, it's white, it's black, it's Indian. And then you break down the mixes of each of those. That's where we get the term mestizo.
Okay.
That's where we get the term mulatto.
Right.
Those are Spanish classifications. But as the Spanish settle in New Spain, what becomes Mexico, they get more and more combinations. What happens when a mulatto marries a mestiza?
Oh,
Well, then you get another one. And this system gets so big that it breaks down under its own weight.
Sure.
There are 48 castas in some reckonings. It's an insane number of castas.
Wow.
dude, I'm so excited. I know nothing about this. I'm learning so much right now. That is a great question. What happens when you do that? Like, what does it do to populations?
Yeah, it's pretty wild. And then people can start to, and this was part of the point of the system, was to get generations to become more white, to try to rise up through the system and eventually get to the rank of Español or Española, white.
Now, that is interesting considering the European context on race at this time, whereas if you have any sort of mixture, you're that.
Right.
Forever.
When you look at the British North American system, it's white, black, and Indian, and that's it.
Right.
If you are white and black, you are black.
Right.
If you are white and Indian, depends on if you're male or female and what culture you ascribe to, but you're one or the other.
Mm-hmm.
And here, they take great pains to come up with this huge pyramidic system where you're trying to figure out where you are.
Would you say it's a pyramid scheme?
That was pretty good. But
This is also a great source for material culture, for the material culture nerds on here,
Okay.
because this gets to be so confusing and so top heavy that they keep coming up with guides for people to try and figure out, like, well, where do you belong on this system? And you get the casta paintings. There are paintings for every rank in the casta system.
wow.
And they often have, like, okay, if you're a mulatto, you're the daughter of a negro and a Español, then they're going to have a painting that shows a representation of each of those. So you've got the mother, the father, and the child. And they're often wearing different clothing representing their rank in society based on their racial
So
classification.
basically, you have to dress like this if this is what you are.
I don't think it's strictly that by law, but that's how they're representing it. So,
Okay.
like, you'll have a Spanish gentleman and then, like, a maid. And then you've got a child who's in between.
Okay.
So it's a very top-heavy system. And on the frontier, this system breaks down almost completely.
Well, of course.
I imagine it
As
broke down
things
pretty
do on
quickly, too.
frontiers.
Yeah. So according to Jennifer Lucido, who is recently interviewed on the California Frontier podcast, to give a shout out there,
Nice.
there are 6 casta designations recognized in Alta California. And this, over time, is reduced to gente de razón, people of reason. That means just not indigenous. And that then breaks down to Californio. But this guy, of course, is indigenous. So what does that look like? And this is, again, earlier on. This isn't before they've gotten to this cultural designation of California, before it becomes its own subculture.
All right.
So in his baptismal record, he's listed as Indio. So he is, to the Spanish authorities, full-blooded indigenous. In the 1790 census, when he is in Alta California, he's now mestizo. He's now half white.
Oh.
And at his burial, gente de razón. He's now just not indigenous.
Oh.
So he evolves as he moves north, and as he becomes part of this colonial structure, he evolves from indigenous to just not indigenous.
That's crazy because he's
That's wild.
the same person he was when he was indigenous.
Yes. And this is a thing that you see quite often in Alta California. Again, I'll point to the Lucido episode of California Frontier Podcast. But there is a lot of movement up the casta system as you head into the frontier. Now, what that means, though, for the local people is they're moving down that system, and it becomes more difficult for them to penetrate that system, and they have a much harder time evolving through it in the way that maybe the casta system was intended to work. So you have a biracial system evolving in Alta California.
That's fascinating.
I
know that the French were a little bit more open to other folks getting together and things like that. And we see that in Louisiana, specifically around New Orleans.
Oh, yeah. I mean, New Orleans is like its own cultural ecosystem.
Exactly. But that's really interesting. I didn't realize there was so much variation going on, specifically in California.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. And again, there's some ways in which that's good for the people that move up there.
Sure.
They're moving out of a system that would have oppressed them, but they're now oppressing a new peoples.
Right.
Professor Jessica Kim said that much of California identity is based on separating yourselves from native people. So the whole point is to not be indigenous.
Right.
This will come to fruition in the annexation period and the gold rush period, when if you are Californio, you become white through the California Constitution. And the biracial system is just redone, recast in a new aesthetic. So he comes up there, as most men do, as a soldado. The soldados of the American Southwest, and especially Alta California, are known as soldados de cuera, meaning soldiers of leather, or leather soldiers, or in some Anglo interpretations in the late 19th, 20th century, leather jackets.
Okay.
They have a very distinct look. These are guys who are operating at the same time that Washington's at Valley Forge, but they look worlds different. It's so different that what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you guys some original images of the Soldados de Cuera, and I want you to try and explain them.
All right.
Explain what you see to the audience.
Matt's going to go first.
Oh, great. Okay.
Because I'm just going to make a bunch of punk rock jokes because I'm already like itching to do that when you started talking about leather jackets.
So we've got some sort of long coat that looks like it's a sleeveless long coat that's thrown over the top of another, perhaps even more formal coat underneath that.
Yes.
It almost looks like chaps for the pants, and then
Botas.
And then they're wearing some form of what are those things called at the shoot? We use them as opposed to
Gators?
They're gaiters. Thank you. That was the term I was.
Oh yeah,
looking
that's
for.
the botas that I was talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. And of course, we've got some shoes of some sort. And
see the spurs.
Yeah, you're right. I didn't see that at first, actually.
California culture evolves around horsemanship. Like the horse becomes the central thing to define California culture. If you read 2 Years Before the Mast, he spends a lot of time talking about how amazing California horsemen are. And the fashion reflects that. California evolves very slowly in fashion, but it does evolve. Interestingly, though, that even by the time of the gold rush, they're still wearing knee breeches in some cases because it's easier to ride in.
So so these, in my image, it looks like he's got like a type of slop on. Like they're not like... You know, like breeches kind of like taper in and button in, and they get like tight to your body right just below your knee. These look like they're kind of open the way a slop would kind of hang.
And what you're seeing is the extension of that sleeveless jacket that Matt was talking about.
It's sewn up on the pants?
It's hanging over the breeches, but it looks like in your image, it kind of looks like a separate pair.
Does this guy have a shield?
He does, yes.
Why does he have a shield?
We're going to talk about that.
Okay.
So the two defining features of the Soldado de Cuera are the cuera, that's the jacket,
okay,
and the adarga, the shield.
Okay.
And we have pretty good...
Got them both between the two of us.
We have pretty good documentation of that. Now, Matt, you called out the jacket, so I'm going to hand you this quote.
Great.
This is a quote by Father Ignaz Pfefferkorn from 1767. So this is just before colonization of California. He may be describing some of the soldados that will just wear this up into Alta California.
Can I ask a question before we get going?
Sure.
Is there a reason that I see like nothing but round hats in this picture?
Yes. See, that's another one is those are cocked hats. They are three-corner hats that have been let down.
They're just down?
For sun protection and whatnot?
Yes.
Well, because the cocked hat is absolutely worthless when it comes to like being anything other than cool looking.
Yeah.
You have to take it like down. That's why I was asking, because like obviously not all of California is a desert. We were talking about the forests that you're familiar with and stuff growing up, but I was like, all these are down, and these are, I'm imagining, because they're function more than fashion right now.
Yes. So they've modified their cocked hats. We do have an image of a Soldado de Cuera from a couple of images from Baja California in the 1760s where they are still wearing the cocked hats. So that might be a specifically Alta California thing. I'm not totally clear on that.
All right.
I'll defer to the expert on California clothing, David Rickman, who runs a great Facebook group called The Arts and Skills of the Spanish Borderlands. And he's actually got a book coming out later this year, 2024. I think this will come out in 2025.
Yeah, by the time you hear this, it's out. Buy the book. You can get it right now.
He's got a book coming out about California fashion that he's been working on for years with the National Park Service. So definitely check that out for these images and others. He'll have a lot more to say about them than I can. But we're going to get that back to our quote by Father Ignaz Pfefferkorn, 1767.
Let's go, Father Pfefferkorn.
So this is describing the jackets that were being mentioned. The jacket consists of 6 or 8 layers of well-cured deerskins fastened together at the edges with a strong seam. This jacket, of knee length, is cut like a coat. It is sleeveless, so that it will not hinder the soldier in the use of his weapons. Instead of being buttoned, it is tied in the front with straps which go around the entire garment. The seams and pockets are decorated with the filigreed leather lined with red cloth. This decoration is quite handsome because the hide is white. These jackets serve the soldiers instead of armor against the arrows of the barbarians.
Yeah, we're going to have, unfortunately, a few quotes with terms like barbarian and savage and stuff. But yeah, the cuera is the knee-length leather jacket. It's 6 layers of buckskin, and it's meant to stop arrows.
That's straight up leather armor.
That's leather armor. That is a descendant of the buff coat from the 16th century.
Right on.
It is a direct descendant of that, of what the conquistadors wore when they fought the Aztecs.
And we're seeing that white and red motif that we see with a lot of Spanish again, too.
Yeah. They are pretty fancy looking coats. There's only one that I know of that still exists.
Oh, really?
And it's in the Spanish Army Museum, I believe, in like Toledo.
That's very cool.
It is pretty cool. More common, there's actually a lot of surviving adargas, shields, which is what you had pointed out. Now, I'm going to give you a quote, shorter one, from Zebulon Pike in 1806.
What a solid name.
I know that name.
Quote, made of sole leather, 3 double, sewed together with thongs with a band on the inside to slip to the left, or to slip the left arm through. Those are the privates around and are about 2 feet in diameter. The officers and non-commissioned officers have their shields oval, bending on both sides in order to permit the arrow to glance. And they have in general the arms of Spain with Don Carlos IV gilt on the outside with various other devices, which add much to the elegance of their appearance on horseback, but are only calculated to be of service against savages who have no firearms. So
again, that emphasis on no firearms.
I feel like 2 things out of that stood out. One, that their enemy is, they're looking at them as vastly inferior. They don't even have the guns. And 2, they also kind of talked about that thing being kind of worthless, but against people with no firearms, it works out just fine.
Yes, and the adarga becomes a symbol of rank for most of the Southwest. Okay. Eventually, the privates start dropping it. You don't see it as much in New Mexico, Texas, Arizona. There is one surviving example. I think it's on display at the Briscoe Museum right now, that was captured at San Jacinto at the end of the Texas Revolution.
Really?
And it's got the Mexican arms on it. It's not Spanish. It's now the eagle with the snake.
Right.
And that seems to have come from a northern Presidio. But it seems to be just a symbol of rank. In California, they keep using it. Okay. Because guns never penetrate to the native population there, they don't really want to give up their advantage.
Sure.
And it's very key that they have the advantage of guns, because there are multiple points at which Presidios or missions would be wiped off the face of the earth if they didn't bring out the muskets. They are vastly outnumbered, and they are barely hanging on at many points in their history. So they definitely don't want those guns getting out there. And that means that they rely a lot more on swords, on shields, on leather armor, and on lances. They're often on horseback with lances and shields. There's numerous images of this, numerous accounts of it. This is how they are exerting military authority and keeping their foothold in Alta California.
This is awesome. I'm excited.
So there's, again, not that many, though. There's only 4 presidios by the end of the Spanish period. San Diego, Santa Barbara, Monterey, and San Francisco. That's the only military installations they have. They have soldiers scattered throughout the missions, but those are the 4 that are like military headquarters,
like the
military
ones.
districts.
Yeah.
Interestingly, Gerardo Gonzalez serves at 3 of those 4.
Really? Wow.
Yes.
Like as his unit moves around, or he just keeps re-enlisted?
They seem to move him around quite a bit. From 1772 to 1782, he transfers between Monterey and San Diego every 2 years. So 5 times in 10 years, he's moving back and forth between Monterey and San Diego.
Interesting.
They seem to do this. They don't really seem to break up by units and like shift units from place to place. They're just grabbing like handfuls of guys and moving them around.
Okay.
Interesting.
I don't know the full context behind that. I haven't done the full research on that, but I am curious as to why that's happening. 1782, he's sent to his final posting, the new Presidio of Santa Barbara. Santa Barbara is initially intended to be a mission. Father Serra goes up there. He says mass on the first day to consecrate the place. But he's there with the new governor of Alta California, Neve. And Neve's like, oh, yeah, by the way, you're not getting a mission here. This is just a Presidio.
And he's like, what?
Yeah, kind of. He's not super happy about
How
that.
dare you break the news to me like this?
So as Dr. Jarrell Jackman points out in his book, Santa Barbara's Royal Presidio, he was the president of the Santa Barbara Historical Trust, and he was overseeing the reconstruction of most of Santa Barbara's Presidio. You can go there today and visit it. As you said, Matt, most of them are modern military installations. You can't get to them.
Right.
But this one was not. Santa Barbara, unlike Monterey, San Francisco, San Diego, it's just the middle of town now. So they bought up lots beginning in the 1960s in the lead up to the bicentennial, and they started building the mission or the Presidio over again. So you can go there and visit it. You can see what a Presidio would have looked like.
That's really cool.
So he spent a lot of time researching this. He, I think, took over in the 1980s and ran it into the 2000s. And he writes this book about his experiences and the history there. He says that Santa Barbara is different from the other Presidios because it's the only one to exist without a mission. It would be years before a mission was actually founded. So the missionaries who were operating in that region had to go to the Chumash villages, that's the indigenous people there, and try to convert them in their own places. They couldn't bring them to a mission and force them to stay, as they did in most other missions.
So they had to go out there and earn it.
Right.
They had to go out there and work for it.
And this is, I think, one of the reasons they don't get a ton of conversions early on.
Well, think about what happens when they knock on your door today. I'm like, no thanks.
Yeah. And so the Chumash also, what this means is that you get a different cultural context here than you do in, say, San Diego. Right. It's still pretty antagonistic, but the Chumash have more power than the Kumeyaay do in the South because they're not being forced to stay. Sure. They don't have to run away. They get to maintain a lot of their social structure. And this will come back around when we talk about the poisoning of Gerardo later on. All right. So when he arrives in Santa Barbara, or shortly thereafter, he meets his future wife. Gerardo meets Maria Tomasa Quintero. She's born in 1772 in Alamos, a town on the eastern side of the Gulf of California. So she's kind of like opposite the Sea of Cortez from Baja California. Maria is born in Alamos, in eastern side of the Gulf of California. Her parents are Maria Petra Rubio and Luis Manuel Quintero. Petra, her mother, her casta was mulata, and Quintero's was negro. So he's black, she's half black. Right. That means that Maria will be seen as mulata. And this is where we get another interesting aspect of this. So we get Gerardo going from Indio to Mestizo to Gente de Razón. Maria is mulata, mulata, mulata. Oh. Never changes.
Interesting.
So even though there's supposed to be a little bit of movement here, and even though you have some wiggle room on the frontier, that's not true for everybody.
Is that because male versus female?
I think it may have more to do with her father.
I see.
Her father, Luis Quintero, is famous in Los Angeles now as the Black Poblador who founds Los Angeles. He is the only man on the census to be listed as Negro. And I think you're visually so obviously black that it makes it harder to move within this system that is still got a fig leaf of pseudoscientific justification.
Sure.
So she moves up north with her father and her sisters. Even though Spain was focused on missions and to a lesser extent presidios, they did at one point want to move more of their already converted population, their already Spanish population, up to Alta California. That's where Los Angeles comes from. So her father comes from Mexico with the family to found a pueblo, to be a citizen of Spain in Los Angeles. She goes with him, with her whole family, and all of her sisters, including her stepsister, married soldados who were assigned to Santa Barbara. So the whole family moves up there.
They're good-looking uniforms, quite attractive.
And again, if the only men you know are soldados, it's
gonna happen.
Yeah,
it's gonna happen.
So she moves up there with her sisters. They're all getting their own families. Shortly after founding the Presidio de Santa Barbara, she marries Gerardo. She is 13. He is 43.
I'm sorry. Time out.
This is not normal.
No. Can we? What? Can you repeat that?
So it's not uncommon for people in their mid-teens, women in their mid-teens, girls in their mid-teens, to marry soldados in Alta California in this period. Almost immediately afterward, the next generation, you don't see this.
Okay, so
But that old though?
but I was
That it's still a big gap. This is very unusual.
yeah, dude, I'm struggling mightily right now. So among the many questions I have, the two simplest ones would be, if they are getting married that young, are they at least remotely age appropriate, like young soldados that are like 18 to 20, or
it's more common to see them in their 20s when they're marrying somebody who's 14, 15. Again, 13 is still definitely an outlier.
I feel like both of the people involved in this marriage are in the extremes of this kind of situation. Like one is a little younger than normal, and the dude is a lot older than normal.
So,
and I am very uncomfortable.
Yeah, you should be. No joke. This is not normal. This is pretty weird.
It's illegal now.
It doesn't. Now it's a little unclear to me what happens for the next 7 years because they don't have children until she's 20. So I'm wondering if this is like a legal thing. Is this like the way that they arrange marriages up there? Like, oh, well, yeah, you're technically married, but like she's not going to live with you until she's 20.
Right.
I don't know what's happening. There's no records to explain what happens in that 7-year gap.
I'm scared.
Me too. I'm prepared to find something disturbing that I haven't yet.
Like when you're a kid and you watch horror movies and you got like kind of the blanket up where you're like, I'm not watching, but I'm watching. That's like, I'm curious enough historically to like want to know if we can just learn this information. Then there's the parent in me. It's like, I don't want to know. There's like full stop. I don't want to know.
So it's still years before they have their first child. They then have 2 more children in quick succession. She's pregnant in 1797 when in February, we circle back to the beginning of the episode, he is apparently poisoned.
Okay.
And that goes back to that quote that we read at the beginning. And then a couple of weeks after that, she has Raphael, who gives us our primary source for the first source, I should say, for this poisoning. So the question then becomes, how much should we question this source? As I mentioned, some historians will often couch it in terms like apparently, or the fact that this happened rests on the testimony of.
Right.
But there are other records to be found. They're a lot easier to find today than they were in the 1880s.
Oh, I believe that.
The internet makes a big difference. So, for example, Gerardo's burial record is at the Mission Santa Barbara. It's transcribed in this excellent database called the Early California Population Project. Now, all of this came about because I was working with my wife, Emily. We were translating and editing the original memoirs that Raphael wrote or transcribed from his oral testimony in 1878. And so she speaks Spanish, I don't.
Oh,
right
so
on.
she's able to read and translate for me.
So
and
she's breezing through her portion of this work, and you're like,
honestly, yeah. There were a lot of nights of me just typing while she talked.
You're like the mouse and the clock. Like, what did my teacher say in high school? The mouse and the friendly clock.
Kyle, that's a good question though. How much has Spanish as a written language, has it changed over the centuries? Because we see that in other languages. There's variations on spelling. There's ways we form letters. You've got the weird double S thing in English that happens for a long time.
Oh, like the long S?
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. That sort of stuff. Do you see that in Spanish?
You do a little bit. It's still very intelligible.
Okay.
Again, it's 1760s. It's not that early.
Yeah,
So
that's fair.
And actually, this is 17. Well, he's speaking in 1878 to a translator who's writing it down.
Okay.
Or transcriber. He is a Spanish speaker. The guy who's
Wait,
writing
I just
it.
realized you said 1870. This man is old.
He is
at this
old,
time,
and he's still got 10 years to go.
Wow.
He dies in his 80s.
Nice.
So it's a fantastic source. There is some difference, and actually there are some differences to California itself. It's got kind of an older style of Spanish speaking.
That makes sense.
And it's also got some really interesting influences because a number of the early settlers and explorers were Catalonian and Basque.
Okay.
And then you get the Franciscans who are from all over the place.
Right.
Junipero Serra himself is from Malaga. and may not have had Spanish as his first language. So there's some interesting influences there. Often one of the ways that you'll see it most obviously when you're traveling through California. So I grew up near the Asistencia Santa Isabel, and Isabel is spelled with a Y. Even though it's pretty late in Spanish history to be doing that. There's a lot of that kind of stuff going on.
Right.
But it is otherwise pretty darn intelligible. It's a lot like modern day Spanish.
Okay.
Neat. That's really neat.
So in this, his cause of death is listed as, and again, I'm not a Spanish speaker, so I hope I pronounce this right, Cuero del toro privado de los sentidos. As Emily translated, he lost his senses.
Oh.
So this seems to come on pretty suddenly. He says that the friar who's writing this administered last rites, despite Gerardo being insensible for having lived as a Christian.
Why not administer first aid?
I think he
why
may
go
have
right
been
to
too
last?
far
Is
gone
the
for
priest
that.
is he in on it?
This record does seem to confirm that he's poisoned. This is how you would write that somebody had been poisoned. They lost their senses. Because as Raphael says in his testimony in 1878, it came on very suddenly. It was like overnight that he gets sick and dies.
Have we asked the why question yet?
Well, he was beating on those kids.
Yeah, but is it just
Well, and we're
for
going to get
that?
into that because a lot of this comes back to the cultural context of the indigenous people there, the Chumash.
Okay.
This is central to understanding why this would happen and how this would happen. Before we get there, though, we have to ask, why would he accept a dish from these people right after he beat their kids?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, probably number one is just colonial bravado. He thinks he's above it. He's been in charge for a while. He's been on the frontier for a long time.
Also, why would they poison him? Why wouldn't they just murk him?
We're going to get to that.
All right.
So he mentions that there's a fish dish. Raphael says that they served him a dinner of fish, and that's how they poisoned him. Fish is kind of a comfort dish in Alta California, at least for the Spanish. Every Friday, Californians would eat fish as part of their Catholic observances.
Sure, that makes sense.
Yep.
Otherwise, this was a very meat-heavy diet. According to culinary historian Robert Foss, it was said by one visitor that California meals were 10 dishes on table, 9 of which were beef with different sauces.
Hell yeah.
They ate so much beef.
Hell yeah.
This is one of those things that I do think I inherited from.
Hell
I remember
yeah.
growing up and just eating beef all the time.
Yeah, dude.
It's not hard to see why Gonzalez would have accepted a fish dinner. It's kind of a treat. It's a different thing. It's lighter, might be more flavorful. And the Chumash are a very seafood heavy people, generally speaking. Having said that, the Chumash are, again, a very diverse group. Their language groups aren't even mutually intelligible. It is just a language group. It's a lot of different people over a big area. But these locals, called the Barbareños, the ones who would eventually become part of the Mission Santa Barbara when that is founded, they are seafood heavy. They do a lot of fishing. They do a lot of shellfish. So that part checks out. That seems to be an accurate representation of how you would get a guy to eat something you want him to eat.
I've always wondered how people with shellfish allergies would have existed in societies like that once upon a time. I feel like you don't survive early childhood.
Some of them might not.
Or a bee allergy
Yeah.
in the wilderness.
I mean, they've existed.
So I reached out to Dr. Jan Timbrook, Curator Emeritus of Ethnography for the Santa Barbara Museum of Natural History. She wrote a book on ethnobotany of the Chumash in this region.
Oh, that's neat.
So I thought, okay, well, if anybody knows,
No joke.
could they have poisoned him? She probably would.
Yeah.
So their pre-Spanish belief system, and it's still in practice at this time in the 1790s, is Chingich.
I'm
I
sorry.
hope I'm pronouncing that right. It is, again, I don't speak Spanish. I definitely don't speak any part of the Chumash language group. Sandra E. Hallman in Foundations of Chumash Complexity says that the most distinctive characteristic of these beliefs concerns the existence of avengers who spied on human beings and enforced the moral code.
Oh.
So punishing offenders is a religious obligation to this part of the Chumash.
But is it like murder? Like you can't just like whoop his ass?
Kinda.
Like an eye for an eye, right? Like,
So-
you whooped our kid's ass, now your ass is getting whooped.
In this period, Chumash chiefs relied on a tipatisin, or master of herbs and keeper of poisons. This is a rank within Chumash society. According to Lynn H. Gamble in the Chumash World European Contact, their identity was a closely guarded secret. and would carry out assassinations of rival chiefs and perhaps ritual poisonings.
Wow.
Though this may have been an affectation to ensure wealthy individuals gave money or resources at ceremonies. Bring it back.
Yes, I'm good with that one.
That's funny.
So,
That's fascinating,
So the
though.
infrastructure for this is already there.
Already there. They have a religious obligation to punish offenders. This guy did a thing that's pretty awful, and they have a rank in society that is specifically meant to poison people.
That's
This all
really,
comes together
really
pretty
neat.
quickly to be like,
Yeah.
yeah, they probably poisoned this guy.
I'm just like stunned that it was like we got to murder this guy and not just like we beat his ass thing.
Now, there's another side to this, which is that a common strain in the history of Spanish colonization of California is violence by the soldados specifically against all the indigenous people.
Oh, yeah.
It is
no surprise.
Very common.
Yeah.
Wait, just to be clear, the people doing the colonizing mistreating the people who were there naturally?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
That's a
that
shock.
is
Yeah, I'm not shocked by that.
very, very common, to the point that the friars are constantly complaining to Mexico City and to the governor that these guys are ruining it for us. Nobody's going to convert if we keep letting these guys mistreat everybody.
Yeah.
This is often sexual abuse, very commonly that in the early Spanish period. But it also is just straight up violence. It's beatings, it's murder. This is a very common thing.
So, okay, so maybe this is why we go straight to murder, because it's just a chance to level some of the playing field.
It could be. And we don't know if there are prior infractions. We don't know if Gerardo is known as a particularly violent soldado. We don't know if these children have been pulled from their families. We don't really have a lot more context other than Raphael says he beat kids, and we can probably be pretty sure that happened.
Yeah.
He's talked about his own dad. I think he's not pulling punches there.
Right.
He's like, his ghost whooped my ass a couple times. He was a hard man.
So Dr. Timbrook suggested paralytic shellfish poisoning might have been used. Somebody had suggested to me at one point that they might have used datura, which is a plant that can cause hallucinations. She said that's very unlikely. Datura within the Chumash religion is used mostly for ritual purposes. It's not used in a aggressive or offensive way. So she thought maybe paralytic shellfish poisoning. We're a little unclear on that because even she said that that's usually only fatal to immunocompromised individuals. That's usually, you've got to do pretty big amounts of it, but it would be very easy to hide in a fish dish.
And the description of what happens to him sounds like they
Right,
say
it comes
he
on
stiffens
so
up.
fast.
Right.
And yeah, he stiffens up and loses his senses.
Right.
It sounds like that. So it could be that.
What he ate,
We don't
like
really know.
Like I took a bite out of like a lionfish or whatever, like one of those fishes that's just like you're not supposed to interact with them at all because you're going to die from them.
Yeah.
All right.
So he gets buried on Valentine's Day, 1797. And the final mystery is there's this interesting footnote in his burial record for the Mission Santa Barbara. It alludes to Rosa Maria Lugo Cota. She's not related to him. I can't find any interaction with them before his death or before her death. She is the wife of the Presidio's Comandante, Pablo Cota. And she dies a month before, January 10th, 1797.
She eats the fish too.
Could be. She's only 36 years old when she dies. We know very little about her. We know that her casta is Española. She's white. And that she's the wife of the Comandante. And it doesn't even say in her burial record anything that would indicate poisoning except to refer to the other burial, to refer to Gerardo's burial. So we don't really know what's going on there. I did some poking around. I tried to find stuff. I haven't found any more information, but it could be maybe the Comandante because he's in charge of things. Things are getting out of hand. They murder his wife as a way of getting to him. Maybe she's been awful.
Yeah.
The only record that we have that sticks out to me is that she becomes godmother to an orphaned Chumash woman who becomes baptized in the church.
Okay.
But that's all we've got. And that doesn't mean all that much without any further context. That's just a thing that happened. There's more research to be done on this. I'd be really curious to see if there's anything else out there. But that's as far as we've got on it. He's almost definitely poisoned. I think all the information that we've gathered here, the burial record, I think we can get rid of that possibly side to it. I'm pretty sure this guy was poisoned.
I mean, it looks, sounds, smells like it, right?
Right. The questions that remain are what they used to do it with, and whether anything else was going on, if there's more context to that.
So what happens in the aftermath of this? Like, this kid grows up with this, my dad was poisoned. Does he, like...
Got a bone, got a beef with...
we've all seen The Princess Bride, right? Like, you mess with somebody's dad.
He doesn't seem to. Even in that passage you read, he's just like, I don't know if they ever punish the offenders. And he just kind of moves on. Now, some of this may be from the way that his memoirs are transcribed. So he's being interviewed by Thomas Savage. Thomas Savage is another Anglo historian, does not speak or read Spanish. And that's why they have this other guy there to write it down for him, to transcribe it, and be the translator between them. And in his introduction to this memoir, Thomas Savage says, yeah, this guy would keep going off topic, and I'd have to bring him back on. And what's interesting about that is that his memoirs are mostly blood and guts stuff. It's mostly mutinies, indigenous uprisings. There's this case of a Franco-Argentine privateer coming up during the Wars of Independence and burning a rancho and raiding the Mission San Juan Capistrano. And it's all stuff like that. It's all blood and guts dad history. And I get the feeling that he would have more to say about like social aspects or the food they were eating or stuff like that. Because when he gets really passionate, when the writing starts to get spaced out a little bit more because the transcriber is trying to keep up, he's often talking about his emotions around meeting the governor of California or something like that, when he's more personally invested in it. And then sometimes you'll see it feels like they're kind of dragging answers out of him when he's like, yeah, there was a mutiny, but I wasn't super involved in it. And they'd be like, well, okay, well, we want to know more about like the guns. And so I think there's stuff that's been cut out, but even in that context, he opens his memoir with talking about the death of his father and then immediately moves on.
And that's because as you're talking, I'm thinking about just the simple fact that our story starts, in the very beginnings of the end of the 18th century. And then, we're talking this guy lives into his 80s. During that time, the area that we're discussing regionally goes through, I don't even know what the word is, such change. Such
massive upheaval.
It is nothing like it was.
We're talking the Empire of Spain, then Mexico, and then Mexico versus Texas. Then Texas, becomes part of, like, we're talking about so much stuff. So maybe the murder of your dad before you were born.
Right. He didn't even really know him.
It like turns into this irrelevant thing when your world is changing like decade to decade. Who's the...
And when you're 81 years old telling this story, everybody who killed him is dead.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like there's anything you could do about it.
The best revenge was just time. I waited.
So he doesn't seem to hold a huge grudge. He does, again, relate other run-ins because he is a soldier. He becomes a soldado de cuera. And he has run-ins for sure with some of these uprisings, but he also works alongside some of the Indios Gentile, the converted Indians. They often go on expeditions together. So it's kind of hard to pull out what his opinion really is, but he doesn't seem to reflect a ton on it from the source that we have. So I don't think that he's super holding a grudge over that specifically. I think it's just an interesting story he can tell.
How old was his father when he was poisoned? He had to be in his late 50s?
Let's see. He was born, I have that right here, 1772. And he dies, no, wait, that's when his wife is born. He's born... I had it written down. I don't have it here. I think he's in his 50s.
Okay. Yeah, it's because you said he's married at 44.
Yes.
There's 10 years.
And that's
not 10 years, 7 years before.
82-ish.
Okay.
So that would make him 50-something?
Yeah.
Yeah, 50-something.
People are living a long time west of the Rockies.
Not all of them.
No. That's true. That's true. So... where do we go from here? Am I supposed to be pumped that the guy that was beating children, bought it? Because I'm a big fan of FAFO. Everybody knows this, right? F around, find out. Huge fan. That's kind of what this sounds like this is.
Well, I think there's something...
But there was no justice for the murder.
Well, I think there's something to be said, too, for reflecting on our own genealogical stories. As public historians, we always run into people who are like, my ancestor did this, my ancestor did that. Yeah. And I think they're interesting stories if you can make them say something more than just, I'm descended from this person. Actually, I'm descended from Moctezuma II. But
it's your fault.
16th great-great-grandfather.
Yeah.
You get back that far, you've got 250,000 ancestors.
Wow.
We have so many ancestors, and most people who lived in the past don't have descendants today.
Mm.
And the population is much smaller back then. It is literally exponential. You look, you're going to find stuff. You're always going to find heroes. You're always going to find villains. You're always going to find average people. And I think we need to get away from knee-jerk defense of our ancestors.
Oh, absolutely.
We can absolutely put things in context. We can say, yeah, this guy was himself indigenous, and a system turned him into the spear point of oppression of a different indigenous group. Mm-hmm. That's totally fine to say. It also doesn't excuse him beating children.
No.
It doesn't excuse the creepier thing of marrying a 13-year-old.
Right.
Again, there might be more context to that, but it looks pretty bad.
I can't imagine what context would make that okay.
Right. Even with the possibility that they weren't living together, that it was like an arranged marriage for when she came of age, that's still super weird.
Like, it's seedy.
That's
seedy
30
across
years
the
of
board.
difference. That's a lot. So I think that there's something to be said for being willing to examine our own backgrounds and being okay with not knee-jerk defense of everybody who we are descended from. There's too many people for us to do that.
Yeah.
And I think there's also something to be said for where we choose to draw our ancestors from. Again, I want to emphasize that I am of Latino descent. I am of Mexican descent, but I wouldn't say I'm Mexican because I'm not raised in that culture. Right. You want to make an Irishman pissed off, you tell him you're Irish.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, look at you, Pat.
I'm an American of Irish descent. I'm not actually Irish.
I know,
And
I'm giving you hell.
that's the other thing is I'm also an American of Irish descent. I'm also of German descent. I'm also of Danish descent.
Well, your family was having a good time back in the day.
Well,
Just
probably yours too.
Oh.
You look at the ways that you trace your lineage. Often people are only looking at their dad and their dad's dad and their dad's dad, but that's not where you're getting all of your background
only half the story.
from. Right. If that, because if you keep going back, you're only getting 1/250th of the story.
Yeah, good point.
You're getting just a sliver of a line. And not to say that's not important, but there are other traditions that we're all drawing from. And that's where I think Spanish California fits into the larger American narrative. This is all happening at the same time as the American Revolution, as the Constitutional Convention, as the early Republic. This is all happening in what becomes the United States. And there are people who spend their entire lives in that geographic place, inheriting that tradition and unaware that they are. And I think that it's important for us to also look at the fact that it isn't just Manifest Destiny. It isn't just Westward Movement. It's also Eastern Movement. California has had a huge cultural impact on the United States of today. And some of that context is Spanish and Mexican California. Mm-hmm. So I think it's important for us to embrace all history. The history that makes us uncomfortable, the history that is from backgrounds we're not familiar with. I think that's what this story can help us grapple with.
Does Zorro appear in this setting at all?
Zorro would have stabbed him.
Yes.
Okay, let me.
I'm a big Zorro fan, and Zorro is much later on. Zorro is like mid to late 19th century.
So that's what I was asking. I was saying, let me rephrase my question. Not the physical character. Like he would definitely have murked this dude. Just the timeline wise is the story setting, because I know that at that point we're definitely firmly into.
Well, I think we got to talk about Zorro, because you can't bring up Spanish California without talking.
You know what?
I mean, I wasn't gonna force that, but I've been kind of itching for that myself.
Well, because our mutual friend, that was one of my favorite like accidental sweet funny things. Our friend Jacob Davis got hired at the medical museum, and you guys put him in a federal uniform, and he instantly turned into the guy
Capitan
from
Love. He looked exactly like the villain from Antonio Banderas. Yep. What is that? Legend of Zorro.
Legend of Zorro. Yep. All right, so thoughts on Zorro?
So I love Zorro. Zorro is to early California what Pirates of the Caribbean is to the golden age of piracy.
Hell yeah.
Oh, that's so perfect.
It's 1-to-1. I mean, there are like general vibes that you get that are widely, broadly accurate, but pretty much nothing in the text is accurate.
Right.
Like, you have a conflict between the church and the Spanish government. You have a conflict between the friars and the soldiers. That's definitely true. The friars aren't exactly like good guys to the native people either. And they're not always on the right side. Junipero Serra, for example, when Governor Neve is coming up there and trying to make colonization softer, I guess is the best way to put it. He says, hey, the missions are never meant to be permanent. The missions are supposed to become local parish churches after you've converted enough of the local population. And Sarah's like, well, we're not there yet. We need to stop this secularization. We need to stop this from becoming a local parish. I need to be in control still. So when Neve is like, hey, we've got to have local elections, we've got to start having indigenous people taking on civil roles and have authority, Sarah instructs his friars to ignore the governor's orders. And when these elections are held despite that, he steals their oath of office. He just takes the papers that the Spanish government sends for them and hides them.
Yeah, he's like, you can't.
He's like, no, we can't have democracy. People are not allowed to make their own decisions. I am the father here to all these people who are older than me.
What?
It's wild. So like, again, there is conflict, and obviously the soldiers aren't the good guys in this story, but like the friars aren't always the good guys either. And often like in the best Zorro movies, you have these huge plazas with giant governor's palaces.
Right.
And he's running across the red tile roofs, and like the architecture looks nothing like that. There's nothing nearly that big in Alta California.
Also, let's be clear. The best Zorro movies are the ones with Antonio Banderas.
I would say the
Zeta-Jones.
first one.
The first one, for
I
sure.
think the second one is kind of a
unfortunately,
mess.
yeah, it goes off the rails.
Catherine Zeta-Jones in both of them?
Yes.
She is.
That's all that matters.
He gave an interview not long ago where they were like, if you were to pass on Zorro, I think it was when he was pushing the Puss in Boots movie, which is also a Zorro film and one of the best.
It definitely is. Oh my God, I never thought. I knew it because having watched Lost Shrek, but those should be considered as Zorro films.
They are, yeah. And he was giving an interview and they're like, okay, well, if you were to pass on the cloak of Zorro, if you were to give the mask to somebody, who would it be? And he gave the only wrong answer, which is Tom Holland.
No. No. Ew. What? Ew. This is the same Antonio Banderas that was in Desperado.
Yes.
Tom Holland's a very good actor. I enjoy his stuff.
But he's Spider-Man.
And he's a kid.
He is older than he looks, but it's
that's
still,
true. That's
he doesn't capture any of it. And also, like, there was a point in the development of The Legend of Zorro where Tom Cruise was attached to be Zorro.
No.
And Tom Cruise said, no, it needs to be a Latino.
Absolutely.
Well, yeah, because
Antonio Banderas isn't Latino, though. He's Spanish.
Yeah,
He was still brought onto the project by Robert Rodriguez, who's Tejano. Mm-hmm. So, like, he's got some cred there. He was in El Mariachi.
But what he has, right, and that's the
he's got some cred there. He, like, has familiarity with the culture. Like, that's definitely better than Tom Cruise. Mm-hmm. And they were looking for Elena, the love interest. They also wanted a Latina actor. But this is the 90s where the actor is so important to marketing. Like today, right, in the age of franchises and IPs, you can get away with just being like, oh, it's a Star Wars movie, whatever. Right. It's Star Wars, go buy the ticket. Back then, it was you have to have a name attached. You have to have star quality. And in that era of Hollywood, Latinas were only pop stars. So Selena, Selena was, I think, passed away by that point.
She was definitely
but Shakira did a screen test for it.
Really?
Yeah, and she's like, I can't do this.
Wait,
I'm
like
not
the
an actress.
Shakira?
Yes.
Oh,
so they considered
awesome.
her at some point. But again, she's not an actress. She didn't feel comfortable doing it.
No, that's
good for
and
her.
so they eventually were like, gave up on the Latina angle, and that's where they got Catherine Zeta-Jones. She's Welsh. So
I didn't realize she was Welsh.
She's amazing. That's
she
all
is very good in the movie. I'm not going to lie, but it was a prioritization that they made at the time, and you're seeing that now. With this age of franchises, with this age of IPs, people are trying to find a way to make Zorro work again because it's like the one franchise that hasn't been touched, that hasn't had a resurgence.
Yeah.
So, and it's also mostly in the public domain.
You need to have somebody with an incredible amount of swag that can play Zorro.
You've got to get that line that like Harrison Ford and Indiana Jones hits, or Brendan Fraser and The Mummy, where you've got an equal amount of competence and buffoonery.
And swagger, yeah.
Right.
You got to be like fun with it. So there's definitely people trying to make it happen. Disney has for like a year and a half been in early production for a Zorro series. I don't know if that's actually going to get off the ground.
I didn't know that.
I'm terrified now.
There's a French series that just came out on Paramount Plus. That's a sort of comedic action take, which is kind of how Zorro is anyway.
Right.
But it's all in French.
Why don't you play Zorro?
I do not have the physique for Zorro. Have you seen me?
Why not? Zorro can be. You just need a hat and a mask and Matt, you actually have some street cred to be Zorro. You know how to. Can you do the swishy thing with the sword?
Swishy
I 100% can do the swishy thing.
Was that like first thing?
So I wasn't going to bring this up, but
Do
when
it.
Mask of Zorro came out, my fencing club was asked by our local theater to do a little sketches, basically in front of the
that's
theater.
fun.
My maestro was Zorro, and I was Capitan Love.
Was it filmed? Was this
Nice.
filmed?
There are pictures I know that exist. I do not know if it was ever filmed.
Can
but
we get some? Can we get a visual of this from the vault sometime?
maybe.
I'd love to see it.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was neat to be involved in kind of like, hey, we're promoting this movie sort of thing. And we were also fencing without masks and stuff. So we were doing some very choreographed bouting. And it was a lot of fun.
Did you make a Z? Did you?
Why
you
would
were
I do
Captain
that? I
Love.
was exactly.
No.
I was the villain.
Oh,
Why would
right.
I do that?
Right. Did he make one on you?
No, we wound up doing some pretty basic back and forths and parry riposte, that sort of thing. And then I eventually.
All right. The reason I asked is when I first started to play guitar, I didn't go to learn music theory. I was like, teach me the chords, the
Right.
power chords I need to rock, and then let me go. I didn't know if you showed up, they gave you your sword, and you were like, teach me to make a Z right now.
I'd been fencing for a couple of years by that point.
Oh,
so
okay.
we were trying to be careful because we didn't have masks or padding or anything like that either. So it was
Safety Matt
we were
was already
working-
born.
We were working through the choreography.
Not me. I'd be out there just whipping stuff.
Well, and that is part of the problem.
And I think that's also sort of the approach that Zorro takes to early California is it'll take inspiration from little bits and pieces, but it is fantasy.
All right.
It is, the Z is the point.
Well, the
It's
Pirates of
cutting
the-
things into walls.
The
Right.
Pirates of the Caribbean analogy was great because as soon as you said it, I was like,
yeah,
that
you
hits
had
it
him hooked.
right on. Well, it hits it right on the nose too. I'm like, that is what it is.
You can enjoy it as long as you're aware that almost none of this has anything to do with the actual early California period. But again, they do take little things, and I think those can also be illustrative of the memory of early California. So in the Mark of Zorro 1940, that's Basil Rathbone and actual Zorro.
Yeah.
Antonio Banderas.
It'll come to me. In that, there's two villains. One is the Basil Rathbone character. He's the evil officer who's kind of the power behind the throne, and he's the real swordsman. The sword fights in that thing are incredible.
And Rathbone could fence.
He
really could.
I remember reading that he was training somebody on the set there, and they lost 8 pounds by the end of the production from
I'll
just
believe that.
Could you beat him?
constantly.
Hell no.
Would you put the title on the line?
Considering I haven't fenced competitively in a decade at this point, no.
So Basil Rathbone, he's the sort of the main villain, if you will. But the actual governor, the evil alcalde, and they kind of use the terms alcalde and governor interchangeably in some of these. He's a sort of feckless governor. He's the guy who's collecting tax money, and he's kind of directing the military, but he's really the puppet. They're kind of telling him what to do. He's okay with cruelty, but he's not doing it himself. His name in that 1940 version is Louis Quintero, the only black founder of Los Angeles. So the draw that they took was, we need a villain name from California history. How about this black guy? Very 1940.
Yeah.
It's
Great.
So there's, again, ways that you're seeing it translated, yet he's not presented as black in the movie.
Right.
In fact, there are no black people in that movie.
There's
There's
it's
almost no
1940s.
Mexicans
The
in that
1940s.
movie. So it's,
They're painted that way, though, I bet.
and you do see the ways that we tell the story of Zorro evolve as we reckon, albeit haltingly, with the history of California. So the Banderas version, they make him Murrieta. Joaquin Murrieta is a famous bandito of the California Gold Rush, if he ever existed at all.
Sure.
And that gave rise to the myth that Zorro was inspired by Joaquin Murrieta. We don't actually have any evidence for that, even though that's if you look for podcasts about Zorro, 90% of them are, here's the story of Joaquin Murrieta, a guy who definitely existed.
We know better because we did this with Blackbeard. There's a lot to famous people of the past.
And even pretty recent past. This is 1851.
Yeah.
And we still don't have a very clear picture on. In fact, the name Murrieta wasn't added to Joaquin until after he was dead.
Really?
So Captain Love, who is a real guy, he was the head of the California Rangers. He ambushes this maybe gang, maybe just guys, cuts off his head, and that starts.
Jesus.
Yeah, it's pretty gruesome. Puts it in a glass jar, and it tours California.
Double Jesus.
So that's why they did
That's
that.
also
I didn't
in
realize,
the movie. So
yeah.
again, they're taking little things that are true in California history, but the name Murrieta isn't applied until after he kills whoever that is and cuts off whoever that is his head and starts exhibiting it. And it may be that was that guy's real name. He happened to be Joaquin, and now you can collect the bounty.
Wow.
So who knows? It's
moly.
pretty dark stuff that gets adapted in a very roundabout tertiary way into the Zorro story.
I didn't think that when we departed from our initial story and we started talking about Zorro that we would encounter stuff this dark. That is so dark.
You're talking to me, man.
No, it's not that.
Well, every single episode is racial politics and depressing.
I'm not bothered by that. I'm not even bothered by this. It's just more the like with Zorro, I always felt this would be the Disney part of the episode, and it was. But then suddenly it's like, yeah, that dude actually cut his head off, and then they took it around.
I mean, they do it in the movie too. So.
I just forgot about that. I mean, I hadn't seen that movie in 25 years.
On display until the San Francisco earthquake of 1906. When it was destroyed.
And falls off a shelf.
Probably burned too.
Oh.
That whole museum burned down.
Oh,
Quote
well, that
unquote
would
museum.
do it.
But what's interesting is that we're also progressing the story of Zorro. It went from 1940, Mark of Zorro, everyone's got transatlantic accents, there's no Mexicans at all, to 1998, Legend of Zorro. We kind of have a Latino lead, and there's a Mexican actor in it.
Yeah.
But the story has also progressed from an explicitly white, explicitly Spanish gentleman to a down-in-the-dirt Latino man who's trying to make his way in a world that's against him.
Oh, my goodness.
It's a very different kind of story, and it's the kind of story we started to become ready for in the 1990s. I'm curious to see what the next iteration is as we wrestle with that history. As that history inspires that fantasy, what does the next Zorro look like?
So to wind this down then, what is the next part of the research for you into this story? Like, do you look for more of like the dad's reputation? Like, what are you looking for next, right? So we're pretty sure the guy is poisoned.
Yes.
So what are we now looking for? Just more of the, like, how does this come to be? Is it just related to this beating of the children? Like, what
this is where it gets frustrating, is that those records might not exist.
Of course,
Yeah.
super familiar with that
I
concept.
might have taken this as far as it can get. So I think the next part is to do similar deep dives on other parts of Raphael's story. As he tells his memoirs, as he progresses from the time of his father's death to his career in California.
And discovering the true origin of Zorro.
Is this guy Zorro?
That's what that is. What I was
Zorro is the
implying.
Count of Monte Cristo and the Scarlet Pimpernel. Let's be real.
Nicely done. Nicely done.
But I think there's because we had this lens into Spanish California. Now we start looking at what does the next generation look like? What is the lens we use to look at the people who truly are Californio, who are not just Spanish in California, but are Californio. Their subculture develops in this period. And in fact, Raphael, when referring to his parents, describes them as de la otra banda. That means of the other branch. And this is from Carlos Solomon, professor of ethnic studies at CSU East Bay. It's a regionalism for people who were born in New Spain or Mexico. So he refers to his own parents as not of his culture.
Interesting.
So it's very quick. As much as Alta California is still part of Spain, still part of Mexico, it becomes its own thing in a very distinct way. And I think that's where we go next. Now that we've had this context of here's the violence, here's the integration, here's the colonization, what does the next step look like, and how does this culture come around?
Do all the states, and I'm going to use the term border states, that would become border states with the Mexican, so Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, do they all kind of share some of these experiences? Because I wonder when we talk about becoming your own thing, Texas kind of becomes its own thing through this kind of same process, one empire to the next country.
And I think it's worth examining the ways in which the different states, the different experiences of the Spanish borderlands define their own cultures. So Texas is a good example because Texas also has missions.
Oh, yeah.
But California, there's 21 missions that go all the way up the coast.
Yeah.
In Texas, they're all in San Antonio.
Yeah, I'm just asking because it seems like as they run into the indigenous peoples, suddenly it just starts to morph into something new. It doesn't
And again, a lot of that
stops being a
depends.
continuation.
And a lot of it depends on the context they're entering.
Right.
Pretty much all of it depends on the context they're entering. In New Mexico, you get the Pueblo Revolt. They kick them out.
Right.
That means that the local people, for the rest of Spanish colonial era, have more authority and more say in what happens around them. That's why there are still people in Taos living in 1,000-year-old houses. Whereas in San Antonio, the reason that these missions are all centered is they weren't initially. They were more spread out. And then the Apache and the Comanche come in, and they're like, yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah.
They bring them all much closer together so they can mutually support each other. Right. And their colonization or their conversion efforts are a little more successful there because the Coahuiltecans, the other local people there, are trying to find some shelter and safety from the Apache and Comanche. So they're more likely to convert and work with the Spanish.
Sure.
So again, you've got very different colonial experiences, and it's all predicated on where you go, on who the indigenous people are there. They're still the decision makers. Right up for California, right up until the gold rush,
right.
They still hold a lot of the cards. And it's not until that huge influx of people from all over the world that they start to really lose ground.
Matt, what year was the gold rush?
49.
Hell yeah. Do you know where I first learned that?
Because of the team?
Because of the team.
Well, that's fine, man. Whatever brings you to the history.
I just wanted to see if you knew. I just wanted to see if you knew a sports trivia question.
Okay.
So for me, a final question. Why do all Californians think they're cooler than everybody else?
Because we are.
Okay.
Look, when you are birthed out of an avocado carried by an endangered condor down the slope of the Sierras on a Santa Ana wind, you can also call yourself cool.
Oh, man.
Thank you for just taking that head on. That was awesome.
I had a legitimate follow-up to that because I'm like, it's like a theme in film and things. But like, you're right. You are born out of an avocado.
It's okay. The ones at the grocery store are unfertilized. It's fine.
That's true. Kyle, I love having you on the show, man. It's always a great time, super informative, lots of laughs. I'm always very happy just to spend time with you. You're an absolutely incredible storyteller. And I love the way that these episodes for our listeners, just a quick background for you, how they kind of come about. It's basically, we met Kyle a couple of years ago and kind of pitched like we do with a lot of our guests, just, we'd love to have you on the show. And Kyle came on, and I think he had a great time because instantly he was like, I got another story. And then bang, you came back. And then that happened again, kind of passively just say, hey, I have another story. I'm looking forward to the next message I get where you're like, I have another one. So I just want to keep this rolling. I kind of want to turn this into a yearly thing now where we just get this annual visit from you. It's like Christmas, but with history.
Yeah. And I'll do a quick pitch, too, that I'm still the executive director at Union Mills Homestead. Not a Mexican site, but come on down. There's lots to see there.
No.
I think it's going to be a good season for us when this comes out, so be sure to come by and check us out.
Absolutely. Union Mills is a fantastic site. So, Matt, final word from you when it comes to just, our subject today, poisoning, Zorro, why Californians think they're rad. Where do you...
Now, this has been an incredibly insightful conversation. I was not aware of a number of the aspects that Kyle brought out, and I'm really pleased that we had it because being on this side of, Midwest born, obviously, but being on this side of the country, I don't hear a lot about. I've got family in California, but it's not a part of my growing up tradition and whatnot.
We have the whole country represented. I'm East Coast.
Yep.
You're Midwest.
Yep.
He's West Coast.
Everything with the South.
That's right.
Well,
and I got family there too, and you do too. So
that's true. That's cool. I think I enjoyed how much passive knowledge I had going into this, like with making a little joke here or some observation there, like just how much of this was already just in my mind without knowing that this is the stuff I know, like just why are the missions everywhere? Because this is how they were colonizing, that stuff like that. So I think that's my favorite part of your storytelling. It's just you ignite the stuff I think I knew, and you connect all the dots. So
that's my hope is that you guys, that your listeners will pick up some of these books that I mentioned, that you'll find whatever it is that sparks your interest, and you'll dig down.
Do you have any British sailing connections to this story?
Ooh. There are some, kind of later than this. because the Californians then become, the big cattle barons.
Right,
they start shipping leather all the way out here. That's why 2 years before the Mass was written, is they were getting leather from California. And there are a number of British sailors that come up that way to try and collect that leather, and also the British colonization of the Pacific Northwest.
Anybody survived the Braddock expedition that pops up in the...
Not that I found yet.
Yeah.
Not counted out.
Yet.
I mean, if they can wind up, if they can survive Monongahela and the Plains of Abraham, who knows where they'll wind up.
If there's anybody that's going to find him, it's going to be you.
That's true.
Obviously. All right, so follow Union Mills on social media just by searching for Union Mills. You can follow the History Things podcast on all of our social media simply also by searching for the History Things podcast. Leaving 5-star reviews and ratings helps everybody. So go to, your social media apps, things like that. Do that for Union Mills. Definitely do it for the History Things podcast. You can reach out to us by email at historythingspodcast@gmail.com. And then if you just happen to know Matt and I on social media, you can follow us as well. But good luck finding those. You might need shovels. For our guest today, Kyle Dalton, it's great to have you back here in studio, man. Always a great time for our co-host today, Matt Borders. I'm your co-host, Pat McGuire. This has been the yearly hangout with Kyle. I got to come up with a name for it. But this has been the History Things podcast. It's been wonderful to see y'all. We'll catch y'all next month. Later!
Adios, hermanos.
Have a good night.